Welcome to Becoming Untriggered, a podcast brought to you by psychodynamic coaches and parents of three, Lavinia Brown and Andrew Lynn.
Together we normalise and unpack common challenges faced by couples and parents, explore how these could be symptoms of unprocessed trauma, and support you with the tried and tested tools for you to show up as the mum or dad, partner, and person you deserve to be. Welcome to Becoming Untriggered podcast. Today we're looking at how to create safety in the home, how to create safety with your kids in an unsafe world. We have many sources of unsafety right now. We want to touch on some of those. We want to touch on the impact that living in a more unstable, unsafe world can have on you and your children. We want to look at different approaches and the pros and cons of each, and then obviously come to what we believe is the right way to do that. So starting off with sources of unsafety, obviously we have natural disasters. We've got one going on right now with the LA fires. We've got wars. We've got nuclear threat, all of which are pretty scary for everyone to witness and, of course, be involved in. How do we manage that with children who aren't as emotionally mature as us?
Yeah, so obviously you've got things going on in the world. You said the world's unsafe, and some people are dealing with unsafety at their doorsteps. So there's keeping them safe on a physical level, but there's also they're exposed to all this information. They're exposed to the information and the unsafety and the fear that comes through their phones and their peers. So how do we put a barrier and not only protect them from what's in their world, but protect them energetically and emotionally from what's going on?
Yeah, and I think it's even worse nowadays than it ever has been. Maybe every generation says this, but I think generally, whether you're right wing, left wing, centre, whatever it is that your political leanings are, I think there is generally less wholehearted trust in institutions because we're getting grassroots reports. Everyone has a camera on their phone, or most people do in the Western world. Everyone can be their own reporter of what is going on. And that leads to a deluge of different opinions and insights, which can be really hard to sift through. Even as an adult, let alone children who are getting bombarded by different opinions online. So I think not having that centralized figure of one media source, one government source, all this misinformation, disinformation, it's really, really confusing. And that's not something I think we had as children. So we're having to find new ways to create even more safety in ways that we perhaps didn't understand or weren't a thing when we were small.
I think there's always been stuff going on, like you said. I mean, your dad grew up in World War II and your mum, right? So that's pretty scary. We had the Gulf War and we had Iraq. We had lots of stuff going on in our upbringing. I remember the LA riots, actually, watching that on TV vividly. There's lots of information now, lots of sources. And the point, like you said earlier, the news used to limit what we saw. So we knew that there was a war going on in Iraq, but now you see the war. You see the front line. The cameras are on the front line, and kids are exposed to graphic violence, graphic images.
Which no one is prepared for. We're all first-line responders without having signed up for that or without being trained for that. So it's very difficult. You can put as many filters on your phone as you like, it's going to come across somehow. And I remember this actually when we were living in Spain, and I'd chosen not to tell the children that Russia had gone to war with Ukraine on the day it started, because why on earth would I? I mean, they don't need to know that until the world knows what's happening. And they came back from school singing slogans that they'd heard in the playground that were pretty out there. And angry with me, actually, for not having informed them earlier. And from their perspective, they thought they looked silly that they didn't know this was going on. I remember the same with COVID. I didn't tell them about COVID. I didn't tell them there was some nasty disease lurking out there because why would I worry them? And yet, again, they found about it from school earlier than I would have informed them. And that created tension. So I want to talk about that, how open you are with what's going on and how much you protect your children, inverted commas, to the degree that that is possible. And just the school point. I think school used to be, I don't know if I'm idealizing childhood. I think that's something we can do. But I think school, whether it was enjoyable or not, was more predictable. You had to go, whether you skived sometimes or not. Your teachers were the second line of primary caregivers, of figures of authority that you were exposed to. And with the lockdowns that most of us experienced, even that's been thrown up into the air. I know a lot of people homeschool, but that's increasing. There's even more burden, I think, on us to be that safe haven. The home needs to be even safer than it perhaps was because school's not there either.
Well, kids know it as well. We talk to a lot of people that say our kids are just refusing to go to school. It's not serving them. They don't feel safe. I think that's linked to the information source as well. People have now got access to lots of information, whereas before you needed to go to school for information, kids are now receiving a lot of information, then they're going to sit in the classroom, somebody's telling them a story, and they're like, well, I don't necessarily believe this, or I don't need you to deliver this information to me. I've actually got the information.
Yeah. So again, it's kind of trust. I don't need to place my trust in you because you are not the sole source of that information. I think the world is less predictable and less safe as a result. Community, again, we all used to travel less, be part of a community where everyone was known. That's certainly more the case in Spain than it is in the UK, where people travel more.
You might live near your grandparents, you might live near your aunt. In Spain, and people used to here.
Yeah, that social cohesion isn't there. People are so much more mobile, especially in the UK and America, where most of our clients are. That source of predictability is gone. And I'm going on about predictability because predictability is one of the, if not the key factor that children need. A lot of my clients have experienced trauma through moving house constantly, through moving schools, moving countries, through their parents getting divorced, through unpredictable moods in the home, a parent that would fly off into anger or one that would collapse into depression. If something's predictable and you understand why it's happening, that's one thing. You can learn from that and then brace against it happening again. But when something's unpredictable and you don't know what the rule book is and you can't learn how to brace, that means you then go into brace or fight, flight position early in order to cope with it should it happen to you. And that's not good for anyone. Really, really dysregulating. It's not good for your nervous system. You're in a threat response, which is only meant to occur very rarely. And yet for you, it's becoming the norm. And your body can't deal with that sustainably.
Definitely. And that also comes from not only the unpredictability of not having the safety, but also the access to the unsafe information. Even if you've got some level of predictability, but you're getting access to graphic violence, or you believe the world is a war zone, or you believe the world is unsafe in your formative years, when your nervous system and your neural pathways are being built, then you will continue into adulthood and live your existence as a child believing and feeling on a nervous system level that you are in a war zone.
And that's why it's so important that the parents are a buffer for that, because that can be corrected. You can feel unsafe and then that is reframed. That's what parents are for. We are here to reframe self-limiting beliefs, maybe untrue beliefs, and to help children develop the resilience that they need in order to be able to cope with unpredictability. So let's talk about ways in which you can approach threat in the outside world, be that natural, be that biological, be that physical, be that political. There's so many. I know that I'm naturally more open than you are. You tend to keep things more to yourself. I'm not saying either one is better or worse, but I think it's interesting that you and I have got quite different approaches to what we share and how we share it. I feel that it's really important to be authentic. And therefore, if I'm feeling unsafe or scared about something, there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong in sharing that, because your kids are going to be feeling that anyway. If you are terrified of something happening, whether you put a brave face on it or not, they're going to be picking up on that energy. So you might as well reassure them that the energy they're picking up is correct. Yes, you are scared. However, what you want to be really careful of is how that fear or unsafety or sadness or whatever negative emotion you're feeling is transmitted. Just to touch on the LA fires, because they're going on right now. And in any disaster, there's often a jump straight away to blaming. Whose fault is this? Who can we demonize? Who can we make out as the baddie? And that's actually projecting feelings of helplessness onto someone else. We all feel helpless in times of strife because very often we don't have power, especially with something like a fire. You're not in a place of power. Blaming isn't helpful. It's a way of not processing that helplessness. So how do you manage that with your children? You want to process it, of course, and that's why I didn't tell my kids about the Ukraine war straight away. So my line is, be honest about what you're feeling in a very calm way. Yes, I am feeling scared. So if you feel scared, I understand that. That's normal. Like, validate it because you're feeling it too. But definitely do the work around what might be coming up for you in the past that would lend some kind of bias to that fear and safety. We don't want to be transmitting that to our kids.
I have a different approach, but it's also a balanced approach. So I think protection of the kids is the most important thing. I'd split it into two things. It's not worth burdening kids with extra responsibility or fear that they have no control over. They're not responsible for it. They don't have the tools. Money, for example. Everyone talks about money in the house, and finance is a big part of family life, but kids have no way of affecting it or changing it or earning money. So I believe that kids shouldn't be burdened with money worries. Right? We're adults and we have control and we can earn money. Therefore, we can bear the responsibility of money burdens. Because I know a lot of men have trauma around lack of money in the household. I've had a lot of clients recently that are still carrying the burden of hearing their parents worrying about money or not having enough. On the other side, which is stuff that you're talking about, which is the stuff that kids are going to find out via social media or at school, I think openness is probably the best thing. I'm with you on not telling the kids about everything that happens instantly, right? Because they don't need to know. And there's a lot of stuff going on in the world. So I would protect them, not necessarily tell them until the time comes where it's required for you to communicate. And then I'm with you. I think you've got to educate, connect with them over it, talk to them about it. But the most important thing is for you to be in a space where you're acting proportionately to the situation. If you have a fear response and you unlock a lot of repressed emotion and you're having this big reaction about this situation that you can't control, then is not the time to share that emotion with the kids, because you're going to project your fear onto them and they're going to have a disproportionate reaction and probably a trauma bond and experience with that event. So it's important that as adults, we process our fear, we process the information, we take time to regulate ourselves, and then we can educate the kids. So yes, there's a fire going on over here. Yes, there's a war going on over here. Yes, there's a disease spreading across the world. But from our point of view, we want to protect the kids. We want to let them know that we're going to create as much safety as we can. We will be as responsible as we can. We'll take all the actions that are required to keep us safe as a family, and they don't need to worry about it.
Yeah, I think a key message is togetherness. The source of so much trauma, attachment trauma in my clients is feeling alone.
Yeah.
Feeling alone with their big feelings, feeling alone in their response. Either they couldn't hold space or they didn't want to. For some reason, our children are terrified of tsunamis. We live in a very far from any kind of seismic hotspot. However, we've traveled around there and we have had some experience of that kind of thing. But whatever your fear is, whether it's justified or logical or rational or not, it's meeting them there and saying, yeah, that feels really scary. I can see that you are terrified that that might happen, and you're getting all sorts of information about how this could happen. And it might. It's unlikely, but should it, and this is the next bit, the soothing, we are all together and we will protect you. That is our job. And we've got your backs, and you are the most important things in our lives. So whether you feel unsafe or whether you are physically unsafe, that's our role to support you and protect you and be there with you.
There's a line though, right? You don't want to indulge fears that are never going to happen. Some fears that the kids have got are rational, and some of them are completely irrational. In both cases, it's important to acknowledge the emotion behind the fear and meet the kids on that level. And then there is an opportunity with some of the kids' fears. Like you said, our kids have a fear of tsunamis because we've traveled around the world and tsunamis have happened in some of the places we've traveled around. But now we live in the middle of England, so maybe it's not relevant for them to fear a tsunami. And in that case, we can educate them about their fears. Because kids don't know. Kids don't have access to the amount of information and knowledge and experience we have.
Or more importantly, they don't know how to sift through it, especially in this age of multiple sources of information. We have more experience and more skeptical lens, perhaps. It's easier for us to sift through what may be true and what might not be.
But you're right. I think a lot of the adults I work with now, a lot of the trauma comes from them feeling that some parts of their emotions were not allowed. And the kids are going to have big emotions now around all this instability, around the fear. They're going to be experiencing big emotions all the time. So the last thing we want to do is discount that experience that they're going through.
Yeah, so meeting the feeling, not necessarily meeting the source of the feeling. Obviously, you're going to educate them around that if it doesn't make sense. And the second part, which I believe is important, that we have their back. If you read the book, The Body Keeps the Score, it's very interesting, the difference between big T trauma and small T trauma. Bessel van der Kolk, the author, talks about how if you come from a stable home where you were securely attached emotionally to not even two parents, but one parent, then that emotional buffer that gives you meant that most people that go through big T trauma, be that violence, plane crash, a war, something like that, natural disaster, they don't need any form of therapy. Many of them don't need any therapy in order to get over that because they have that safety within. It's literally been wired into their system, which is kind of amazing. Yeah. Whereas those that come from a home where things were more unpredictable emotionally and physically, where they didn't have a solid, secure, predictable attachment with one parent or one primary caregiver, they are the people that usually need therapy to get over big T trauma. And obviously, our line of work is dealing with the little T trauma that creates. It just underlines how much of a buffer that's our role. Emotionally, more than anything, obviously physically too, but emotionally, if you can give that child that sense of belonging, they're not alone. They're part of a family unit that has their back, that their feelings are valid, whatever they are, however irrational or illogical that feeling is, amazing. That creates that sense of innate worth and safety that will carry them through anything.
It's not just big T trauma that it protects you against. Like you said, it is everything. If you think about your nervous system as a window of tolerance, and Vessel might even talk about this, that secure attachment means you leave the home in the middle of the window of tolerance. And that means you can take the ups of a trauma, you can take the downs, and you can remain within the window. You can remain regulated, and therefore you can handle everything and you return back to the middle. But if you're not, if you're at the top of the window of tolerance, which so many people are, the top of that window of tolerance, it's not just big T trauma, which will take you way out into the red zone, but small stuff, stress, relationships, work, it can all just take you over the edge.
Noise, the children fighting,
noise.
The messiness of a house.
Exactly.
Those are all massive triggers for me that would take me into a hugely disproportionate, dysregulated state.
And that's how you know where you are within the window of tolerance. And it's our job, not just as parents, to be that regulated, secure, safe person, not just mentally, but in terms of our body and our nervous system, so we can protect our kids. But also it's important in every aspect of our life.
Yeah, I think that is the biggest gift you can give your children. If you want to create safety in your home, if you want your children to feel safe, you have to feel safe. This isn't putting on an act. Oh, we're safe, it's all okay. That's not what I'm talking about. It's about feeling safe in your body, that you can handle emotionally anything that comes your way. That doesn't mean it's not going to look messy. It's not repressed, but it's about being able to come back from that experience, explain it to your kids, reassure them that what was going on, be able to recount the steps of what happened if necessary. And for them to know that they might also have that sometimes, and it's okay because you come back to the middle of that window of tolerance. And, we have to mention it, inner child. The inner child is the part of you that overreacts. The inner child is the part of you that's way, way too high in that window of tolerance. So if you don't look at your past, you're not going to be able to change how you feel inside. It is all about how you were treated, how you felt, what your worldview was, how your parents treated you and how they treated others. It's all so important in terms of how attached and how secure you feel.
Yeah, you can't pretend safety in your house. You can't fake it. And your nervous system and where you are on your window of tolerance is all about your childhood experience. If you're carrying around repressed emotion from the past, then your nervous system is going to feel dysregulated all the time. If it was dysregulated in your childhood and you haven't done the work to regulate it in the long term, then it's still going to be dysregulated. So it's all about reliving those experiences, releasing the emotion, integrating those parts of you that didn't feel safe so you can become present and you can become regulated. And that is a journey, right? That doesn't happen overnight. There is work involved in that.
Yeah, and I think these things that are happening around us now are opportunities for growth. Always, everything that happens is an opportunity for growth. So if you are feeling very dysregulated by anything that is in the news at the moment, by anything that is on your social media feed, by anything that your friends or co-parents are talking about, look at it. Why does it make you feel so unsafe? Because the bottom line is the world is unpredictable. It's not that we've just realized it is. It always has been. And perhaps people are feeling it more now because the institutions that used to be that external mummy and daddy figure aren't perhaps living up to that role anymore. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think they were always meant to. But we live in a patriarchal society. So looking at why you're feeling dysregulated by the fact that the world, life is unpredictable, creating that inner safety with the inner parent, doing the work to release those old stuck emotions. And from that place, you can handle unpredictability because it is life, whether that comes in the form of a disease or a war or a natural disaster. You can handle it. You will get through it. You can look at all the times that you have already got through it. But we really want to do this from a regulated point of view. That is the key takeaway. Whether you share with your children what's going on, whether you don't, the way in which you do it and the impact that will have on your children all comes from how safe you are. Hopefully that was helpful. We can't fix the world's problems, but we can help you to feel a little bit more resilient when dealing with them. If what we discussed was helpful, please subscribe and leave us a 5-star review. For more of the same, check out my social media, The Inner Child Healing Expert, or to work with me, go to laviniabrown.com.
You can find me on andrewlynn.net or Life Coach for Dads on Instagram. We work with both individuals and couples. If there are any topics you'd like us to cover, please reach out. Thanks for listening.